Eurythmy is sometimes called visible speech or visible song. And what it's attempting to do is to translate into bodily movement what we normally only apprehend as sound. So it takes seriously the idea that in the beginning was the word.
There is light. We neither see nor touch it.
We know that behind everything that we hear, there's movement. At the very most rudimentary level, there's vibration, if nothing else. Yeah? So Eurythmy takes that idea absolutely seriously and says that for every sound, for every vowel sound, for every consonant sound, for every soul mood in music, for example, of major, minor, there are certain gestures that are representative, that embody those qualities.
All the noise of living being is only a contorted echo of exalted heavenly harmonies.
Because eurythmy is first and foremost a movement of consciousness, and only lastly a movement of the physical body.
We are seeking the soul. Nice. If the soul is awoken, then the spirit will find a place.
Rudolf Steiner sometimes called eurythmy soul gymnastics. Soul gymnastics. So that the soul, the whole of our emotive life that feels the joys and sorrows, it is able to move as flexibly and as quickly as a gymnast normally moves the physical body. And she was a mouse. And the relationship between our individuality, the soul body, the life body, and the physical body completely has to transform if you want to do eurythmy.
It's 4 years of training, and we hope that by the end of the training one has really become a eurythmist, has really been able to penetrate one's own instrument and is able to take the movement into one's life and apply it in the way that is appropriate.
I mean, what we hope is that there will be people that will in fact start taking eurythmy into places it has never been brought before. And the core of our training, I have to say, which may make it somewhat distinctive because of the really pronounced focus on it, is that we know that the absolute fundament of a eurythmy training, I would say the fundament to understanding art, life, creation, evolution, everything, is the evolution of consciousness. And a deep understanding of what does it mean that there's been an evolution of consciousness.
In earlier times we had great teachers, initiates, who taught, and their teachings were carried forward through the mysteries. They guided all of culture and humanity. We have, with this age of enlightenment, awakening, the individuals really begin to be able to think for themselves. Descartes says, I think, therefore I am. The human being begins to think for themselves, to really have and be able to acknowledge their feelings, and really ultimately then be able to do for themselves. This is the gift of the age of enlightenment. We could say we're long not done with enlightenment. We're still working through it, hopefully. But it's not an enlightenment that is bestowed by a great teacher.
All that is important on the earth is that which one heart speaks to another in silent greeting.
When Rudolf Steiner was bringing the evolution of consciousness as an idea 90, 100 years ago, it was a radical idea. People didn't know what he was talking about for the most part. He was laughed out of town. These days, you can get PhDs in the evolution of consciousness at universities around the world. Things have changed. That notion is a core principle of Waldorf education. That's why you decide that certain things are appropriate at certain ages, because children recapitulate the whole of that human evolution. Okay, so this is usually the very first lesson that I do with a preschool class. There once was a cobbler. One of the reasons that I particularly love teaching eurythmy more than juggling or drama work, even other things, is that I have yet to find anything that so beautifully helps one come to a balanced sense of me and what's important that I do and what's we, I and thou. That as a social unit, we move and work together, but what's my responsibility in that? To just be me and do what I need to do, and still in relationship to what you and we need. And keep your heart open to them. Don't give them the cold shoulder. We feel, that means turn to and meet everybody as you go by. Hearts warm. What's the relationship of an individuality to a group? That's all about the evolution of consciousness. It's not the same now as it was 100 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago.
Is it an ancient text in which you would be having a completely different expression to the sounds, to the space around, or is it a very modern, awake piece in which you have to work much more with what is in between and the passage, the movement between the tones, for example? Instead of a wonderful harmonic structure that carries you and supports you. All those elements are keys to understanding how to be expressive in your art as a eurythmist, as well as primarily understanding Waldorf curriculum and being able to be effective with the children that stand in front of you.
I wake myself to reheat the day, to see, to hear, to work and play. I wake myself. A favorite moment. They love it. They wait for it. It's amazing. I wake myself. There's an element of moving toward being a teacher in the classroom from year one. You'll see it when you look at the schedule and some of the topics that we'll be covering. It starts right in the first year. So that when I make a gesture with a class in eurythmy, I am attempting to not just move my physical body and have the kids imitate it, but I'm attempting to move from my higher bodies, and those higher bodies are bringing the children, so to speak, in my soul etheric jet stream. The great King, the dearly beloved King, was dying. Up jumped the princess, and she said, "Only the water of life can heal my father." The fairy tale is this archetypal picture in the soul, so that the dragons that are slain, or the trolls that are overcome, or the fears that are overcome, are all in us. We are the king. We are our own higher kingship, queenship. We are our own fear. We are our own terror. We are our own challenge. We are our own soul that needs to be set free. All of those images, they take place within the theater of our own interior world.
No one can escape their fate, said the emperor. Be patient, be brave, and God will have pity on you.
When we're moving with you and we work with the sounds, you know, we have it there because it's a practiced way of really, it's accessible, but it takes time first to find one's orientation of oneself in relationship to the space around, to the life of these sounds, to the fullness of soul and the real intention of the spirit through all of this. And that's a four-year training to have that at hand.
To begin to have it at hand.
To begin to have it at hand. So it becomes a capacity. And you'll find it grows as a child does. You practice a little bit each day, it grows, it changes, and you really, it's once you learn to ride the bicycle, you don't fall off.
Now you're winding in with E. In, winding, and forward and spreading out. Yes. Spreading further out, out, and forward. Good. There's an image that has been used sometimes about what a eurythmy training is that it's like what happens with precious stones. The precious stones are usually just geodes, you know, they're lying around, they're all rough and got all sorts of rough edges. And you put them all into a big hopper, and you shake it and shake it and shake it and shake it and shake it, and the friction that comes between rubs off all those sharp and crusty bits, and then you open the hopper, pour it out, and there's nothing but these beautiful, shining, glorious, semi-precious stones.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that is what happens in eurythmy training.
And it is a weekly commitment.
It's a daily commitment for 4 years. It's every morning in the first 2 weeks. So every morning for 4 years. And using basically a school calendar, a Waldorf school calendar.
Do not be afraid, he said. I will do you no harm.
There will certainly be reading work to do, but I would say that the first 2 years are very much more working on the instrument, really learning to breathe and sleep and move with consistency in one's own instrument.
In drawing breath, twice less are we.
The training was always seen, it was called an Ausbildung, so something that was not, it's not about focus, but really becoming manifold, manifoldly developed and expanded, one could say. And certainly one has to focus oneself to come through the training, but the actual development is in many, many, many different spheres, so that the human being can be expressive in many, many ways, can be colorful, can know what it is to form, to work with clay and stone, and to find that shaping force within oneself, to be able to work on the surface and into the color, and to hear the sounds, to work with what is a poet's inspiration or a composer's inspiration.
Also, Schiller's looking at what are the creative poles in us, or what brings about creativity in the human being. And it's this interplay between burgeoning life force, which is, you could say, is related to the will, or the need in us to create form, to create structure. And he describes, I'm sure this is not new for some of you, he describes these two things are intrinsic in the human being, on the one hand, and on the other hand, the need to bring form. And both of them are in and of themselves, and if you stay in either one of them, one-sided. And the resolution of those, in that sort of lemniscate movement, comes through the middle, comes through the heart, in what children do in the activity of play.
What shall I do
What shall I do?
Cried the princess. By playing, you take things that are structured and given, you rip it apart and make it into something new. Or you just take whatever's there and you play with it and bring it into some kind of form, structure. And he describes that that impulse that all human beings have to play in the adult is what's called art. And that's this feeling realm that is able to unite head and limbs in the feeling realm of art, and which is why Waldorf education is all out of that impulse.
Did we make it? Everybody back where they started? Yes!
It's hard.